I've been scouring the interwebs for the best comments, and only the best, that's yours, made it to Ask the Captain. Here's question number 1. All right, Dustin Rose II, 7277 asks, with an incident seemingly in the news almost every day, why are we still flying? Are things getting more dangerous? Well, if they get a news report on every car accident out there with a fatality, you would never get in a car again. And it would be the same with other forms of transportation. So I would say there's a heightened awareness these days because there's been a couple of major accidents this year, but it's still the safest way to go. There are 106,000 flights a day worldwide that take off and land safely. If one a month makes it on the news for turbulence or an engine failure or something like that, again, there were no fatalities, nobody was injured, it just made it onto the news. It kind of heightens the whole thing and makes it seem like it's bigger than it really is. Aviation is safer today than it's ever been before, even though there was, in my opinion, 2 major accidents this year with fatalities. It's still the safest way to go. All right. Next question is, Callie Cessor writes, is it just me, or are there a lot of issues with flying recently? I'm just talking about that. Or am I just noticing it more because of the internet and social media? Well, on this channel, what we're trying to do is we're trying to inform and educate you about how airplanes fly and when things do go wrong, why they went wrong, but what the backup systems are there, especially in the training, to be able to mitigate or capture those threats. I think you hear of so few actual accidents where anybody is hurt or, there's a fatality in the aviation business because of those different layers of training. And what we're trying to do here is bring all that stuff to you. So does it seem like it's heightened because everybody's talking about it? A little bit, but it ought to be reassuring at the same time that you understand now how the system works, and it actually does work very well. That's a good question. All right, Lil Y Ishu says, there's a lot of talk about clear air turbulence causing these incidents. Can you explain what that actually is and why it's so dangerous? Well, clear air turbulence are no more dangerous than any other turbulence. It's kind of a misnomer that sometimes you're in clouds and you hit turbulence. Most of the turbulence I run into are not in clouds. They're what you would call clear air turbulence, but they're also forecast. So let me show you something which is actually pretty cool. And it's on the iPad that I've been issued. And for instance, this is called WSI, and it's a weather service that is updated instantaneously on the airplane. So every few minutes I get an update on this. And you can see this purple line across here. If you can't see it, there's a purple line. That's the one I follow to my destination. And I fly through some of these green areas. Those are areas of forecast turbulence. And then I get a box that pops up that tells me it's moderate turbulence or it's light turbulence, what altitude it's at. I know this well in advance of flying into that area, so I can either climb or descend or go around it if I need to avoid the turbulence. So that's information we have today that we didn't have years ago. Helps us to avoid these things. One of the issues is it just tends to make it on the news, especially in a heightened awareness news cycle. But there's no more danger than there ever used to be before. So there's the answer to that. All right. Peter Disbury writes, a plane dropped 1,000 feet in an instant. I'm not sure about that, but okay, 1,000 feet in an instant. Why can't the sophisticated weather radar and technology on modern aircraft detect this kind of severe turbulence ahead of time? It can detect severe turbulence. And in fact, we are not allowed to be dispatched through known severe turbulence. That weather app I just showed you will show an area of severe turbulence. I'm not allowed legally to fly through it. I have to go around it. And then there's also pilot reports. So other pilots that are on, let's say, the North Atlantic tracks, and there's usually, maybe 10 to 12 tracks going over to Europe and coming back from Europe every evening. And those tracks, the pilots will talk to each other. We've got a discrete frequency that we just broadcast, hey, I've got into some moderate turbulence, and we let everybody else know. So we're constantly checking with each other, constantly checking the Wi-Fi, constantly checking the weather apps to make sure that we don't fly through severe turbulence. All right. Hull Dude 66 writes, Some viewers are connecting increased turbulence to global warming, suggesting that a warming atmosphere is making the air more volatile. Is there any scientific truth to this from a pilot's perspective? I am not a scientist. I don't know the first thing about any of that stuff. I have a few hours of meteorological training. I'm not a meteorologist, though. I do know from a pilot's perspective. In fact, these days, it's probably a little bit less than it was years ago. I remember in my early years of flying, there was a lot more turbulence. I don't know if there's any connection whatsoever. That's another discussion for another day. All right, Lives Outdoors, C2V. When we hear a plane dropped 1,000 feet, there's 1,000 feet again, it sounds like a free fall. Can you explain what is actually happening to the aircraft during a severe turbulence event like this? Well, there's no such thing as an air pocket, all right? A lot of people say, we hit an air pocket in the airplane, like there was no air in the airplane, like hit a vacuum and just descended on its own. That's not the way it works. There's always air going over the wings of the airplane. Now, there are updrafts and downdrafts, and sometimes if you get into a very bad turbulence situation, the converging air inside that air mass can force you up or it can force you down. That's not a drop. That airplane is still moving forward at the same time. It can feel like a drop. That's why if the seatbelt sign is on, my friends, you must keep the seatbelt fastened. I don't understand people who, as soon as the airplane rotates, they take their seatbelt off. Do you want to get hurt? I don't understand that mentality. It's not bothering you. You can keep it loosely fitted about you, but you don't have, as soon as you unbuckle it, you run the danger of hitting the overhead. If for some reason there is one of those like air pocket things, all right, but there's a downdraft or an updraft that would force you out of your seat, you don't want to hit the overhead. Just keep your seatbelt fastened. That's all you got to do when you're in your seat. That will protect you from just about anything. All right, Joe Ma 077, sorry. Many people believe a plane can't survive severe turbulence. From an engineering and aerodynamic standpoint, has there ever been a crash purely due to turbulence, or are modern airliners built to withstand it? They are. They're absolutely built to withstand it. I don't know of any crashes that were attributed to severe turbulence. There have been some airplanes that received damage. Some people clearly got hurt in severe turbulence, but nobody I know has ever, the airplane's ever come apart. Go to YouTube and just type in Boeing airplane wing stress test, and you'll see a number of videos of them in the factory taking these big hydraulic machines and literally bending the wings of the airplane till they almost touch at the top before they break. That's how strong these airplanes are. They are completely over-engineered. It's going to make you uncomfortable in the airplane when you get into turbulence, no doubt about that. You might spill your drink. If you got your seatbelt on, you're not going to get hurt, even if you go through severe turbulence. And there's no fear of the airplane coming apart, the wings coming off, or anything like that. That's not going to happen. The airplanes are completely over-engineered. That's not going to happen. All right. Good question, though. All right. AJ Flex writes, flight data suggests other planes in the area flew around the storm system, but this flight went right into it. Can you explain the decision-making process for navigating weather and why a pilot might choose to fly through a storm instead of deviating? That would be pilot error if they flew into a known storm system. Now, as it's depicted on the weather radar in front of you, sometimes there are areas in between cells, right? And you can say, okay, I think I can, turn left here and get around this cell and then fly and miss that one. The problem with trying to do that, in my opinion, is that you don't know how quickly those cells are building and how quickly they're organizing. And if they organize too quickly and they build too quickly, that little gap that you have to fly through might disappear. And I have known some accidents in the past where pilots used poor judgment and they tried to shoot the gap and the gap closed on them. So again, it's better to turn around and go back, or to go someplace else, or to go to your alternate instead of trying to pick your way through thunderstorms. Anytime I've flown through any sort of weather issue in front of me, it wasn't organized. There was one here, there was one there, and there was one over here, but there wasn't a whole line of weather kind of combining itself. So again, Yeah, you gotta have some wisdom, and you gotta have some age and maturity up in that cockpit. So you've heard me talk about the forced retirement of pilots at age 65. What you lose with that, with the one size fits all policy of having to retire at a certain age, is the wisdom, the maturity, and the judgment that comes from all those years of learning about stuff like this from either other pilots or having experienced it yourself, going, hey, I'm not going to make that mistake again. Not that younger pilots make all those mistakes, but again, there's no substitute for experience and judgment. There just isn't. Okay, great one. All right, I got Beth Kelsey 1. I was on a flight that dropped so fast, people were screaming. What is it like in the cockpit during a sudden severe plunge like that? And what are the immediate actions we have to take? Well, keep your seatbelt fastened for one. Screaming, it might be a normal response to something that feels like it's out of control. If it makes you feel better, go ahead, but it doesn't solve anything. Up in the cockpit now, we would be caught up in that the same way that you would. And I've always got my seatbelt fastened up front, so I'm not going to hit the instruments over top. You monitor the airplane. You make sure the autopilot stays engaged. If the airplane does descend quickly because of a downdraft, you're going to do what you can to get the airplane back up to altitude. And then you're going to make sure that you get out of that severe turbulence situation as quickly as you can. Well, one of the first things I do if there's anything close to that is I just key up the mic and I talk to air traffic control and I say, hey, yeah, whatever altitude we're at 350. We just encountered moderate, maybe momentarily severe turbulence. Do you have a better ride at any other altitude? And they might say, well, you got to go down to 29,000 feet to get a good ride. Roger, requesting flight level 290 now. And they'll give it to you and you'll descend down to 290 or whatever the smooth altitude is. So we take proactive, maybe it's a little reactive, but we try to take proactive steps to avoid that in the first place. If we get caught up in it, then we're going to take reactive steps to get you to a safe altitude. Okay, I've got Shaq Azula, 7870. Many people were injured. Is it fair to assume most of them weren't wearing seatbelts? Just because the seatbelt sign is off, does that mean you should remove it? Well, I always tell people in every PA I make, when I turn that seatbelt sign off, you're free to get up and stretch your legs and move around the cabin. When you're back in your seat, I'm going to insist that you keep that seatbelt fastened, even if the seatbelt sign is off. And here's why. Good old Captain Steve keeps his seatbelt fastened at all times. I can't always predict bumpy air. I'm concerned for your safety. And so do good old Captain Steve a personal favor and keep that seatbelt fastened at all times when you're back in your seat. I want you to have a safe journey. And I make the personal plea so that people hear what I'm saying. And hopefully more people click that seatbelt than don't. But I can't go back and do it for them. All right. Okay, Laura Schendel, and a bunch of letters and numbers. As a flight attendant who received 40 stitches from unexpected turbulence, wow, sorry about that. I can't stress enough the importance of wearing your seatbelt. Here you go. That's a traveling professional. From your perspective in the cockpit, what is the one thing you wish every passenger understood about this simple safety rule? Well, it might just save you a real injury at some point. She had 40 stitches. You don't want to go through that, my friends. The flight attendants sometimes have to be out of their seats doing certain things. It's much more dangerous for them, but you should keep that seatbelt fastened at all times. Again, next time you get in an airplane, look up above you when you sit in your seat. Where is the ceiling above you? You can probably reach up and touch it. It's like right there. All right. If you should come out of your seat suddenly because of a severe downdraft on the airplane, you're going to hit that overhead. If you have your seatbelt on, you're not. Simple as that. So if you want to hit your head violently on the overhead, just undo that seatbelt. If you want to be safe, put that seatbelt on. And here's another professional telling you to do so. SJP 374. It's often recommended to get up and stretch on long flights to avoid blood clots. How do passengers balance that health advice with the very real risk of sudden unexpected turbulence? Usually the type of turbulence that we're talking about in this Ask the Captain are ones that you're already in at least light and probably continuously moderate turbulence before you hit a pocket of severe. So I would say if the airplane's bouncing around or your drink is sloshing out of your cup, that is not the time to get up and stretch your legs. You can sit in your seat and you can kind of massage your legs if you want to. Get compression socks if you're going to be on a long flight. They're very helpful, but you can do some exercises right there in your seat. I do it all the time up at the cockpit. I'll sit there and I'll massage my calves and my ankles to make sure everything keeps moving. I don't get up and walk around very often. I've got to be at my seat doing my duties. So again, wait until it's completely smooth and I turn that seatbelt sign off. Then you know I've already looked at all of my stuff on my iPad. I've made sure it's going to be clear up ahead. I don't just turn that seatbelt sign off for no reason. Then you can get up, go to the bathroom, stretch your legs, do some exercises, do some deep knee bends, massage your legs a little bit. But then when you get back in your seat, click that seatbelt. All right. Good on you. All right. Vanessa Avia Pi 2407. I always have my seatbelt on. Good for you. Good for you. But what if a severe turbulence event happens while you're in the bathroom or walking back to your seat? What are passengers and crew supposed to do? Well, again, all the years I've been flying, I've never gone from completely smooth air to a severe turbulence incident. It just, I'm not going to say it couldn't happen, but it would be really, really rare, really rare. You're most likely going to go from light turbulence to moderate turbulence before you hit a pocket of severe. It doesn't work the other way, where you go from completely smooth to severe turbulence. I'm sure it's happened at some point. But again, if you're up walking around, you might get hurt. And so there's not much you can do to avoid that. I wouldn't lose any sleep over this. It's something it just doesn't happen. You're already going to know that seatbelt sign's already going to be on, and you probably shouldn't get up out of your seat. All right, Catherine Kashner 3294 has a question. Can you talk about the specific risks to lap children during severe turbulence? Is it true that a parent simply cannot hold on to their child in those conditions? Well, you probably could hold on to your child, but you'd have to be sitting there the entire flight with your arms around your child waiting for that moment to happen. That's not going to happen. There's not a child on the planet that's going to allow that, and you're going to get tired after a while. My recommendation for you is one of two things. If you've got a lap child, bring a car seat with you and look for a flight where there's an empty seat or two so you can get an empty seat next to you to put that car seat in. There's no guarantee. The airline is under no obligation to provide for you a free seat for that lap child. You could buy a seat for that child. And if you're that concerned about the safety of your child, which you ought to be, you should probably buy a seat for them, bring that car seat, strap that child into that car seat. That child will be safe for the duration of the flight. That's my recommendation. All right, Marlene Y7L writes, I saw that the standards were low, so I quit flying years ago. Do you believe safety standards in the industry have declined over the years? I couldn't disagree with your assessment more. The standards are high in the aviation industry. I don't know where you got that impression, but the amount of training, check rides that I have to go through is absolutely incredible. There's no other profession I know of. I had a friend that was a surgeon, and he'd been a surgeon for over 40 years. And I said, how often do you have to go through like a check ride or an audit? Or he goes, I don't. He goes, I just do my practice. He doesn't have anybody looking over his shoulder. He doesn't have anybody checking on him. I get a check ride every 9 months I have for my entire career. In addition to that, I get random check rides where if I just show up to work and there's a check pilot, they'll give me a check ride on that. I have to do tests I have to take all of the time. And I do quarterly learning. Once every 3 months, I've got a whole battery of tests I have to take and so forth. And that's in addition to the check ride that the airplane gives me every single time I go to work. So the standards have been increasingly getting better over the years. The job has been getting harder and harder because of those higher and higher standards. And it really is extraordinary. So I'm not sure where you got that assessment. All right, Dirk A84. At this point, I only try to fly on an Airbus. I avoid Boeing aircraft altogether. As a pilot, what do you say to passengers who are now afraid to fly on Boeing airplanes? Well, I've flown Boeing my entire life, and I know I'm going to get heat for this in the comments, but you know what, folks? I throw balls and strikes on this channel. I call balls and strikes on this channel. I try to call things the way I see them. I love Boeing. I love the Boeing products I've flown. And if you want to leave a comment that I'm in the tank for Boeing or I'm getting paid by Boeing, do me a favor, call Boeing and ask them if they could send the check because I haven't seen it yet. Okay. I would love to get paid by Boeing, but I don't get paid by Boeing. I'm just telling you, having flown Boeing products for 40 years, I love Boeing products. They're very, very well engineered. Have they had problems in the past? Yes. Have they made the news? Yes. Airbus has too. All right. They call the Airbus the flying laptop for a reason. It's much more computerized and less pilot friendly than a Boeing aircraft is. I would rather fly a Boeing than an Airbus because it's more pilot centric than flying a computer. But that's my personal preference. And you can make yours. If you want to fly an Airbus and not fly Boeing, that's completely up to you. I love Boeing. All right. Let the comments fly. Go ahead. All right. Last question. I've got Loon Nelson 547. My son is a flight instructor starting with a regional airline, and he says the scariest part of his day is driving on the interstate. As a professional pilot, do you still believe flying is safer than driving? Absolutely. I always say that. I go, the scariest part of the day is when we arrive someplace, we have to get in the van and go to the hotel. It's not because somebody else is at the controls. We're just on busy roads, interstate highways, you name it. There's all sorts of people. You don't know whether they're on drugs, whether they've been drinking, whether they know how to drive a car or not. There's all sorts of weather conditions. As a professional pilot, it is absolutely safe to fly. It's much safer than driving. I think in the United States alone, there are 40,000 plus fatalities every year on the nation's highways. There's not nearly that many in aviation. If there's 100 or 200, that's an extraordinarily bad year. And so I can tell you, I know you get it up here. It's safe. You know that intellectually, but it's our heart that bothers us about this. And I understand the emotions. That's why on this channel, we're trying to straighten out the facts, help you be informed and educated so that you feel safer about going flying. Good old Captain Steve wouldn't tell you something that's not true. And by the way, I'm in that airplane with you. Every time we go flying, I am totally committed to the safety of that flight. And so is every pilot you ever fly with. You can't always say that about an autonomous car or being in the back seat of somebody else that's driving the cab for you. All right. Now, hopefully they are. But again, I know the type of training I go through, and I know how much I'm totally committed to the safety of that flight, mine and yours. Well, that's been a good Ask the Captain. Great discussion here. I hope you feel more reassured about flying now these days. Turbulence are a real thing, but they are not nearly as dangerous as you might think. All right. Keep those questions coming because you might make the next episode of Ask the Captain.